The wine glass in her hand trembled as my words pierced through the false sense of control she had desperately clung to. The carefully crafted speech she and Todd had prepared unraveled into silence, leaving her defenseless against the mountain of evidence I presented. Her denials and excuses crumbled as I seized control of the narrative she had so confidently thought she commanded. But before we delve further into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you enjoy stories like these, don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. For a decade, our marriage was a journey marked by shared dreams and unwavering commitment. Sherry and I had built a life together, a life filled with love, laughter, and a partnership that once felt unbreakable. I still remember the early days, the spark between us, the effortless connection we shared. Whether it was mundane errands or thrilling road trips, we did it all together. And it wasn't just love. It was a bond that felt eternal. But over time, something changed. The vibrant connection we once shared began to unravel, at first imperceptibly, and then with undeniable clarity. The signs were subtle at the beginning. A missed dinner here, unexplained lateness there. Sherry's enthusiasm for our shared hobbies faded. Pottery classes she once adored and Sunday afternoons spent painting tiles for our Christmas village became distant memories. Even her laughter, once so full of life, felt forced when we were alone. I tried attributing it to stress or the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship, but deep down, a gnawing sense of unease took root. Something was undeniably wrong. As time went on, the changes in Sherry became impossible to ignore. She began coming home later and later, offering convenient excuses, deadlines at work, impromptu team meetings, or heavy traffic. Her wardrobe shifted too, trading comfortable outfits for bold, provocative ones. I tried convincing myself she was embracing newfound confidence, but my instincts told me there was more to it. And then there was Todd. At first, his name came up casually, a co-worker she mentioned in passing. But soon I noticed how often she spoke of him, how her face lit up when she did. It was a glow I hadn't seen in years, and each mention of his name felt like a dagger to my heart. When I tried to voice my concerns, Sherry dismissed them effortlessly. "You're just being paranoid," she'd say, her tone exasperated yet calm. "Todd's just a friend. Don't let your insecurities ruin what we have." Her words stung, not because I believed them, but because they were so rehearsed, so dismissive. It was as though my feelings didn't matter, but I knew what I saw and felt. Sherry was slipping away from me, piece by piece. The breaking point came one evening when I stumbled upon an innocuous email she had left open. While the words weren't explicitly damning, the tone was far too intimate for a professional exchange. That was the moment I knew I couldn't turn a blind eye any longer. I needed the truth. Driven by heartbreak and determination, I found myself sitting across from Jake Sloan, a private investigator. It was a step I never thought I'd take, but as I recounted my suspicions, I felt an odd mixture of dread and relief. If Sherry had betrayed me, at least I would finally have proof. But a part of me still clung to the faint hope that the woman I had loved so deeply for 10 years wouldn't destroy the life we had built together. The report Jake provided was devastatingly clear. It painted an undeniable picture of Sherry and Todd's relationship, one that had far surpassed the boundaries of friendship. Through meticulous observation, photographs, and a summary of intercepted messages, the truth was laid bare. The photographs revealed an intimacy that couldn't be dismissed. Lunch breaks where they sat far too close, hands brushing in fleeting yet deliberate gestures. Sherry, once so reserved, laughed with Todd in a way that radiated something far deeper than camaraderie. One image in particular stood out. Todd gently tucking a strand of hair behind Sherry's ear. It was a small gesture, but the tenderness it conveyed was undeniable. The messages were equally revealing. While Sherry avoided outright declarations of love, the tone of their exchanges was deeply personal. Todd frequently praised her, not in a professional way, but by admiring her intelligence, smile, and presence. Sherry confided in him, sharing feelings of loneliness and dissatisfaction in our marriage. Their conversations weren't just flirtatious, they were confessions. Todd had become her confidant, a role that should have been mine. Even more damning were their plans to meet outside of work. Todd suggested a romantic dinner at an upscale restaurant, followed by dancing. Though Sherry initially hesitated, Todd's persistence was evident. He reassured her that their time together wasn't betrayal but a step towards self-discovery. His words were carefully chosen to ease her guilt while deepening his hold on her. Todd's manipulation was insidious, framing their affair as a solution rather than a problem. He even planted the idea that I, her husband, might come to accept their relationship if it made her happier. His rhetoric was calculated, preying on Sherry's insecurities while masking his selfish motives. Their plans escalated when Todd proposed a getaway while his wife was out of town. Messages revealed their excitement and meticulous planning. Sherry considered fabricating a story about a girls' weekend, but Todd's encouragement emboldened her. "You deserve this," he insisted. The private investigator's report didn't just confirm their emotional entanglement. It exposed Todd's calculated efforts to manipulate Sherry. His promises, while appealing, were hollow and served only his desires. For Sherry, his attention had become a dangerous escape, one that inflicted irreparable damage on our marriage. Each piece of evidence was another crack in the foundation of trust. By the time I finished reading the report, the illusion of our life together was completely shattered. The truth had become inescapable, and I was left with a decision that would change everything. Her wineglass quivered in her grasp as my words dismantled the illusion of control she had so carefully constructed. The rehearsed dialogue she and Todd had planned dissolved into silence, leaving her defenseless against the avalanche of evidence I revealed. Her denials and justifications crumbled as I seized the narrative she had once thought was hers to command. But before we dive deeper into this story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated. Our 10-year marriage had been a journey of shared dreams and unwavering devotion. Sherry and I had built a life together, one that was once filled with love, laughter, and a deep sense of partnership. I still vividly recall the early days, the spark we shared, the seamless connection between us. Everything felt natural, from mundane late-night errands to adventurous road trips. It wasn't just love. It was a bond that seemed indestructible. Yet, over time, something shifted. The vibrant connection we once shared began to fray, at first imperceptibly, then with undeniable clarity. The warning signs were subtle initially: missed dinners, unexplained delays. Sherry's enthusiasm for our shared activities waned. Pottery classes she once loved, and Sunday afternoons spent painting tiles for our Christmas village, became distant memories. Her laughter, once so genuine, felt forced when it was just the two of us. I tried to dismiss it as stress or the natural ebb of a long-term relationship, but a growing unease took hold deep inside me. Something was undeniably wrong. As the changes became harder to ignore, Sherry started coming home later, offering plausible excuses: tight deadlines, sudden meetings, or heavy traffic. Her wardrobe changed too, swapping comfortable clothes for bold, eye-catching outfits. I tried to convince myself it was newfound confidence, but my instincts whispered otherwise. Then there was Todd. Initially, his name popped up casually, a co-worker mentioned here and there. But soon I noticed how frequently she spoke of him and how her face brightened whenever she did. It was a light I hadn't seen in years, and each mention of his name was like a knife to my heart. When I voiced my concerns, Sherry brushed them off with practiced ease. "You're overthinking," she'd say with exasperation. Todd's just a friend. Don't let your insecurities ruin this. Her dismissive words stung, not because I believed them, but because they made my feelings seem irrelevant. But I knew what I felt, what I saw. Sherry was slipping away bit by bit. The breaking point came one evening when I stumbled upon an innocuous email she had carelessly left open. The words weren't damning, but the tone was far too personal for a professional exchange. That was when I knew I couldn't turn a blind eye any longer. I needed answers. Driven by heartbreak and determination, I found myself in the office of Jake Sloan, a private investigator. It was a step I never imagined taking, but as I shared my suspicions with him, I felt an unsettling mix of dread and relief. If Sherry had betrayed me, at least I would finally know. Yet part of me still clung to the hope that the woman I had loved for a decade hadn't completely destroyed what we had built together. The report Jake provided was thorough and devastating. It confirmed what I had feared. Sherry and Todd's relationship had crossed far beyond professional boundaries. Through carefully documented photos and summaries of intercepted messages, the truth was undeniable. The photographs revealed a closeness that couldn't be mistaken for platonic. Images of lunch breaks showed them sitting too closely, their knees touching under the table. A fleeting but intimate embrace in the parking lot. One photo, in particular, stood out. Todd gently brushing a stray hair from Sherry's face, his expression both soft and possessive. Sherry's response was equally telling, her head tilted slightly, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. The messages were even more revealing. While they avoided explicit declarations of love, the emotional intimacy was unmistakable. Todd showered her with compliments, praising her intelligence, beauty, and wit. "You brighten my days, Sherry," he wrote in one text. "I can't imagine getting through the week without you." She replied with equal intensity, "You understand me in ways no one else does." What cut the deepest were the messages where they discussed me. While Sherry never outright insulted me, Todd wasn't as restrained. He described me as rigid and unimaginative, implying I was incapable of giving Sherry the life she deserved. Her silence in response to his criticisms felt like an agreement, an admission that I had failed her. The most incriminating part of the report detailed their plans for the future. Todd suggested they take advantage of his wife's absence to spend a night at a luxury hotel. Their messages showed meticulous planning. Sherry hesitated, suggesting excuses like a girl's weekend. But Todd dismissed the idea, encouraging her to be honest. "He'll understand," Todd insisted. "If he loves you, he'll want you to be happy, even if it's with someone else." Reading those words ignited a fury I didn't know I was capable of. Todd's arrogance was galling, but Sherry's willingness to entertain his suggestions hurt even more. She seemed to genuinely believe I would silently endure her betrayal to keep her in my life. Their plan, framed as some twisted intervention to justify their affair, was beyond comprehension. The emotional infidelity was devastating in its own right. Sherry had shared her dreams, her vulnerabilities, her very self with another man, a betrayal that hollowed me out. Flashes of our early years together came rushing back. The late-night walks, the hobbies we shared, the nights spent laughing until we couldn't breathe. How had we gone from that to this? The pain and rage were overwhelming, but I knew confronting her in anger would only play into their hands. If I wanted control, I had to approach this strategically. Over the weekend, I devised a plan. I imagined every possible scenario, rehearsing my responses to her likely reactions. My goal wasn't just to expose her deceit. It was to leave her no room to twist the narrative. Sherry and Todd had scripted their intervention, but they hadn't accounted for my resolve. By the time Monday came, I was ready. "I actually have something to talk to you about, too," she began, her tone overly nonchalant. "There's something I think we should address." "Go on," he replied, leaning back slightly. His calm, measured demeanor threw her off balance, making her falter as she tried to maintain her composure. Sherry took a deep breath, her eyes briefly darting away from his. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us," she started, her voice steady but tinged with unease. "About our marriage and ways we might improve it." His lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Improve it," he repeated, his tone laced with curiosity. "That's an interesting choice of words. Please, continue." Her confidence began to waver, and the carefully rehearsed lines in her mind started to crumble under his composed exterior. "Well, I feel like we've lost some of the spark," she ventured hesitantly, "and I think there are things we could do to bring it back. Like a romantic dinner and an overnight stay at the Gaylord Texas Hotel," he interjected, his tone sharp yet composed. The color drained from her face as she froze, her hand mid-motion. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice trembling. He leaned forward, locking eyes with her. His gaze was piercing, his voice low but firm. "Don't insult my intelligence, Sherry. I know everything. About you, Todd, and the plans you've been making." Her hand trembled as she hastily set down her glass before it tipped over. "That's not true," she blurted out, her voice rising defensively. "You're imagining things." "Enough," he cut her off sharply. The single word sliced through her denial like a knife. He reached into the folder beside him and slid several photographs across the table. Sherry's eyes widened as she stared at the damning evidence, her hand intertwined with Todd's, the two of them leaning close, his lips brushing her cheek. The clarity of the images left no room for misinterpretation. Her breath hitched and she looked up at him, her face pale. "I can explain," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm sure you can," he replied bitterly, folding his arms. "But nothing you say will erase what I've seen or read." He tapped the folder, his gaze unrelenting. "Emails, texts, lunch dates, late nights. You've been planning this for weeks, haven't you?" Tears began to well in her eyes as she weakly shook her head. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice quivering. "Todd and it's not serious. It never went that far." He let out a cold, humorless laugh. "Not serious," he echoed, incredulous. "You rehearsed how to tell me you wanted a date night with another man, Sherry. You planned to come back home to me afterward, pretending nothing happened. And you call that not serious?" Her composure shattered as her shoulders shook and tears streamed down her face. "I made a mistake," she choked out, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to get this far. I never wanted to hurt you." "You didn't mean to hurt me," he said, his voice rising for the first time. "You lied to me, betrayed me, and convinced yourself that I'd be okay with it. You thought I'd sit here and let you make a fool of me." Her sobs grew louder as she gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "Please listen to me," she pleaded. "I'll end it. I'll quit my job. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." He shook his head slowly, his expression hard. "It's too late for that, Sherry," he said, his voice heavy with finality. "I want a divorce." The word struck her like a blow, and she gasped, her eyes widening in shock. "No," she whispered, shaking her head vehemently. "No, you don't mean that. You can't mean that." "I do," he said firmly. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll be served the papers by Friday." Her face crumpled as she buried it in her hands, her sobs muffled but wrenching. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Don't do this. Don't throw away everything we've built." He stood, the chair scraping against the floor as he pushed it back. "You threw it away the moment you chose him over us," he said coldly. "I'm done, Sherry." As he turned to leave, her cries echoed behind him, but he didn't look back. The kitchen, once a place of peace, was now filled with the raw, unfiltered reality of their shattered marriage. The confrontation had ended, but the aftermath lingered like the bitter taste of unfinished wine. Her hands trembled as she clutched a tissue, tears streaming freely, yet the walls between them remained insurmountable. Sherry's regret, though sincere, wasn't enough to dismantle the barriers they had built. On the final day of therapy, the narrator spoke with quiet determination, his tone carrying a sense of finality. I've tried to find a way to move past this, but I can't, he admitted. I'll always wonder, always question. That's no way for either of us to live. Sherry's tears flowed, but she didn't argue. Deep down, she understood he was right. As they left the therapy office for the last time, the reality of their broken marriage settled between them, a bond irreparably damaged by choices that couldn't be undone. The legal separation. The legal proceedings mirrored the cold and detached nature of the emotional wreckage that had preceded them. Sitting across from Sherry in the sterile atmosphere of the mediator's office, the narrator couldn't ignore the bitter sense of closure creeping in. This wasn't the life they had envisioned a decade ago when they promised forever to each other in front of family and friends. That forever had now unraveled into discussions about assets and signatures. The mediator methodically outlined the division of their shared belongings. The house, once filled with laughter and memories, was to be sold, and the profits divided, not evenly, but equitably. Sherry's emotional betrayal, though not physical, carried weight in the legal proceedings. The evidence gathered by the private investigator, coupled with her admissions during therapy, painted a clear picture of her actions. As a result, her share of the proceeds was significantly reduced. Sherry sat in resigned silence as the decision was announced. She understood the consequences of her choices and had no grounds to protest. The cars were divided similarly. The narrator retained the newer vehicle he had been paying for, while Sherry was left with the older one. Each decision symbolized how their once unified life had been dismantled, piece by piece. Todd's unraveling. Meanwhile, Todd faced his own fallout. His wife, armed with evidence from her own private investigator, moved swiftly and decisively. Their divorce was finalized quickly and left Todd with even fewer resources than Sherry. Ironically, despite all his promises and assurances to Sherry, Todd had no intention of staying with her. When Sherry reached out to him seeking solace and support from the man she had risked her marriage for, she was met with cold indifference. Todd had already moved on, pursuing a younger co-worker. His words of affection and understanding were exposed as self-serving manipulations. Sherry was left alone, her life in shambles. She had lost her marriage, her home, and the man she believed would offer her a fresh start. The weight of her decisions bore down on her, forcing her to face the emptiness she had created. A new chapter for the narrator. For the narrator, the process, while painful, marked a turning point. As the final documents were signed, he felt a sense of resolution. It was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, free from the burden of betrayal. The mornings, once filled with tension and distrust, now began with quiet moments of reflection and gratitude. He rediscovered the small joys in life, wandering through local parks, taking scenic drives with no destination, and reconnecting with old friends. These simple pleasures, once overshadowed by the strain of a crumbling marriage, became sources of renewal and peace. As the weeks turned into months, opportunities for growth emerged. He picked up photography, channeling his emotions into capturing the beauty of the world through a camera lens. Workshops and meetups introduced him to like-minded individuals, and among them was a woman whose warmth and laughter brought a sense of hope. While cautious, he allowed himself to embrace the possibility of love once again. Sherry's downfall. In stark contrast, Sherry's life spiraled further into disarray. After Todd's abrupt departure, her efforts to rebuild felt hollow. Todd had been a fleeting escape, not the enduring connection she had envisioned. Attempts to pursue other relationships fell flat. Prospective partners were deterred by the emotional baggage she carried, leaving her increasingly isolated. Her once busy social life dwindled to lonely evenings spent scrolling through old photographs and messages, haunted by memories of what she had lost. Regret and shame gnawed at her, forcing her to confront the choices that had led her here. "How could I have been so blind?" she whispered to herself, her voice echoing in the emptiness of her new, smaller home. The realization that she had traded something genuine for a fleeting thrill was a bitter truth she struggled to accept. The final contrast. The contrast between their lives was stark. While the narrator thrived, forging a new path filled with promise and joy, Sherry remained trapped in the consequences of her actions. Her attempts to rebuild were stifled by an inability to forgive herself, leaving her in a loop of self-doubt and longing for the stability she had so carelessly discarded. As the story drew to a close, its message became clear. Life is shaped by the choices we make and the accountability we accept. The narrator's journey underscored the resilience needed to rebuild and the importance of letting go, while Sherry's struggles served as a poignant reminder of the lasting impact of regret and missed opportunities. Together, their paths offered a powerful lesson in trust, honesty, and the courage to face the repercussions of one's actions.